today from your side?
Hello?
Yeah. How many participants are joining from your side?
I think all the participants are joined, sir. I'll give
No,
you the clarification.
I'm unable to hear you. Can you come near to the mic, please?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now?
No, still not clear.
Just a moment, sir. Now can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, it is better than before. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think all the persons joined. You can go ahead, sir. I'll give you clarification by UOE, sir. Okay.
Okay, fine. Okay, so let us get started, guys. Give me a moment. I'll just share my screen with you and we can continue. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Great. So yesterday we got introduced about the term API. We saw the meaning of terms like web services, and then APIs, and then microservices, and we saw the meaning of an engaging enterprise. We have also seen different ways in which APIs can be exposed. So, and we finally concluded on this slide, which says the definition of the API management means that you got to have at least four core functionalities supported: creation of the API, running of the API, management of the API, and securing the API. So we have also discussed that IBM, along with other players in the market, they provide different kinds of products that support these API management functionalities. So this was the slide where we left it yesterday. Am I right, guys?
Yeah. Yeah.
So from here onwards, our main focus is learning IBM API management and its features. This screenshot that you're going to see going forward, those screenshots are for illustration purpose. These screenshots belong to API management version 3. If you go and check these same screenshots in the correct version of the API management, you will find them different than what it is here, but from capability perspective, they remain the same. So the capabilities that we are discussing here, they remain the same from version 3 to version 5, which is the latest version. So IBM API management features. It lets you intuitively and iteratively define APIs and associated policies. You can rapidly assemble API via configuration and not coding. And you can minimize risk with industry-leading security and scalability. So let's understand one by one. The first one is, so we saw that any API management needs to provide you an environment where you can create APIs. So this slide typically says that IBM API Connect lets you intuitively and iteratively define the APIs. So you can define the APIs using all modern techniques. This is a coding-free environment, which means that API Connect encourages you to do assembling of the API rather than coding of the API. This is important to remember here. In API Connect, it is not the case that you don't have a way to do the coding. It can't be. In any practical product, you have to provide a way to code. And API Connect is not an exception. However, the focus in the API Connect is on assembling the API rather than building the API through the code. So this is something that you got to keep in mind. This results in shorter development time, and this results in artifacts which are easy to deploy from one environment to another environment, as they do not have compiled dependencies. API management provides you scalability by default. So you need not have to worry about how you're going to scale up or scale down. That is taken care by the API management infrastructure. So security and scalability are inbuilt into the API connected environment. As a developer of the API, you simply do not worry about them. It allows you, so as I told you, this screenshot depicts that you can assemble the API using the tool set provided. Once again, I would say the screenshot is a little older because it belongs to API Connect version 3. But from capability perspective, once again, I would say that nothing much has changed. You can connect to one or more data sources like DB2, MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, etc. The mapping between input and output happens just by dragging and dropping fields. And you can write transformation messages in order to transform a particular field value with a simple click. So these tools together help you to build your API in a rapid and easy way. You can meter your API through API entitlement. What is metering? Metering is a cloud-specific term. And metering stands for measuring the API. What do we mean by measuring the API? Well, you have exposed your API as a commodity. And this commodity is consumed by several of your customers. You got to control the consumption. It cannot be the case that one of the customer is overburdening your system with API calls while other customers, they are waiting in a queue or they are starving. So you got to have control. You can build in that control in API Connect by means of API entitlement. API entitlement is an older term. The newer term is API plan. With API plan, you can create several plans like public plan, gold plan, silver plan, etc. You can specify different rate limits and burst limits for each of these plans. And then you can combine these plans together and create a product. These products, when subscribed by a particular customer, they subscribe to a specific plan, and hence the rate limit and burst limit is specified there applies to the customer. So we have a way in which we can control how much API consumption is done by a customer. In fact, in modern API management or modern API Connect, so guys, please understand that when I use the term API Connect or use the term API management, I use them interchangeably. But whenever I use them, I mean API Connect version 5.x. So I usually use these terms interchangeably. So what I'm saying is that you can not only restrict a user to subscribe to a specific plan, but you can also record their API calls and you can charge them back. Such accounting facilities are not inbuilt into the IBM API Connect platform, but such accounting facilities can be integrated with IBM API Connect platform. Here is a side note. When you work with on-premise API Connect environment, you essentially get a screen from where you can integrate some particular billing softwares with your API Connect. The statistics collected related to consumption of API, they get fed into the accounting software and they can derive the cost out of that. However, API Connect environment that exists on the cloud, it lets you do that only if you have taken professional or enterprise class subscription. If you have not taken these subscriptions, such screens won't be visible to you and you will not be able to integrate billing software with that. However, this does not mean that the statistics are not collected. Statistics are collected and they are there. Even if you have a free plan for API Connect in the cloud. This is metering through API entitlements. Any question up to this point, guys? Any question up to this point? No? Yes?
I think no question.
Okay, it's clear then. Let's go to the next one. Security. There are 3 different ways in which you can secure your APIs. The first one is API key and API secret. I won't say this is an industry strength way, industry scalable way of securing your API, but it is there. And in almost all practical cases, the API key and API secret based security is accompanied by some other security mechanisms. But we need to understand the significance of API key and API secret in API Connect product. It is this piece of information by which the API Connect identifies a customer. If it doesn't have this piece of information, it can in no way identify a customer. Does that mean that the customer won't be able to invoke the API? Well, technically, this is not true. Technically, you can configure your APIs to be invoked in an anonymous way. However, if you do that, you lose significant competitive advantage. What advantage you're going to lose? You will not be able to collect metering statistics associated with your API Connect. And hence, the benefit of metering that we understood just before, those benefits go away. It is very important that in API Connect, you provide at least the bare minimum security by attaching API key and API secret based security. That's the first one. Okay. However, you need more granular security mechanisms. In an enterprise class environment, authenticating a user is also important. Users typically enter their user ID and password in an app-provided form. For example, there is a banking app. When it boots up, it does a handshake with the backend API by providing its API key and API secret. Once that handshake is complete, the app is authenticated. Mark my words, the app is authenticated, and then the app pops up a login screen to a user stating, provide me your credentials and then I'll authenticate you. There could be millions of such customers, and they will have their own different user IDs and passwords. These user IDs and passwords are typically stored in what we call LDAP servers. There could be several examples of LDAP servers. For example, Active Directory coming from Microsoft side, Tivoli Access Manager coming from IBM side, Oracle Enterprise Manager coming from Oracle side. There could be several examples of it. But the bottom line is that the user ID and password must come from client side and must get validated by the help of these LDAP servers. And if everything is found clean and green, the app lets the user log in and proceed further. This is also feasible in IBM API Connect. Third one, so this is LDAP based authentication. The third one, OAuth. We'll have detailed discussion about OAuth and how the OAuth needs to be implemented in IBM API Connect in our future session. As of now, the only thing that I can tell you is that OAuth is the de facto standard of API security these days, and everybody is trying to use that. IBM API Connect also supports authentication with the help of OAuth. So OAuth workflows are supported, and typically OAuth 2.0 workflows are supported. The beautiful part is that in order to implement any of these securities that I have mentioned, you really do not have to do even a single line of code. It can all be achieved using configurations and exercising them in the proper way. Any questions so far, guys?
No question.
Okay. Debugging and error handling. Well, this slide should have better be titled Testing, Debugging, and Error Handling. API Connect provides you built-in tool for doing the testing, then debugging, and then the error handling. Error handling can be done by throwing and catching the error much the same way as you throw and catch errors in Java. For debugging, you have the ability to see the logs, and you have the ability to capture these logs to a granularity that is desired by you. As far as testing goes, testing tools are inbuilt into the API Connect developer workbench, and without leaving the developer workbench, you will be able to deploy your API in test environment and should be able to test your API in the test environment. So these tools are inbuilt. You do not have to rely on external tools. For example, SOAP UI or similar other tools in order to test your APIs. You can test your APIs directly from IBM Developer Workbench. So this is what we mean by testing, debugging, and error handling. Monitoring. Monitoring and metering goes hand in hand. While metering tells you the statistics associated with API invocation, monitoring lets you collect that. There is a specific screen in IBM API Connect platform where you can see these statistics and their invocation. These statistics greatly rely on client's ability to send API key and API secret issued to them in each API calls. If it is not, the monitoring won't work. The statistics won't work. So by monitoring the API, you will be able to pinpoint fluctuations. You will be able to understand in much detail the response time associated with each API. You will be able to analyze which APIs are highly popular versus which APIs are lagging behind. You can slice and dice this statistics in order to understand which customer is invoking your API by how much amount. And the better part is that you can export these analytics for your management. These all details can be seen now on a statistics panel of the API Connect, and they are collected for you by default. So you can easily change several views over there. You can even export the analytics data so that you can load it into better charting tool that can provide you more beautiful diagrams than can be done by the API Connect product. But essentially, the feature is there. Any question, guys, so far?
Here on the API management.
Hello?
Yeah, my question is on API management, there is no external tool to debug or just error handle it. So how could we manage this debugging on the API management? Is there any other interface to send a message?
Is your question very specific to debugging and error handling?
Yes.
Or is it specific to? Okay. So with respect to debugging and error handling, what's your
Yeah.
question?
Actually, for in another products like Data Power or IIB, we have an external tool like SOAP UI or RFTutel just to send a message and debug or just to handle the error handler. But is there any means here, as you said, we don't use any external tool for debugging?
All right. So first of all, I would say that SOAP UI is not a debugging tool; it's a testing tool. Am I right?
Yeah, just in order
I'll
to debug.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll contrast it with the data power in a moment.
Okay.
Give me a second. So these tools are testing tools, RFH util or SOAP UI. And they help you enter your messages and they help you construct those request messages even and then send it to the backend service which gives you response. It shows you response to. Am I right?
Yeah, correct.
Right. The reason why you use these tools and especially SOAP UI because you don't have to worry about the structure of the request. It automatically creates it for you, right? And it hides several other things behind the scene. It lets you send it to the backend by automatically guessing the endpoint and then showing you the response along with HTTP traffic details like HTTP headers, etc. With IBM API Connect, these can be done by a similar tool inbuilt with IBM API Connect Developer Workbench. So you need not have to leave your browser window for this. This tool is just there. So you compose your API there. Mark my words. I'm not saying you program your API. You compose your APIs. And then once your composition is complete, there is a tool alongside which lets you publish this API on your development environment there and then. And once it is published, alongside you will find another tool that works most likely like a SOAP UI or RFH util. It lets you construct your request messages and it lets you invoke those APIs. Having said that, there is nothing that is stopping you to use the SOAP UI. It is supported. It's not the case that it will not be supported. But as far as the inbuilt tools are concerned, if you know them, you hardly go to the SOAP UI to test them through there. It's a redundant effort. You want to do that, you can do that. But it's a redundant. That's one. Second, as far as debugging goes, debugging has its own way, and that depends upon the product. The way you debug in Data Power is not the same the way you debug it in IIB. And hence, it cannot be the same in IBM API Connect. The way IBM API Connect is always a cloud environment. We will see it later on. And in a cloud environment, the components are essentially distributed. These distributed components, they generate logs. And if you go ahead and look at each of these component logs, you will not be able to figure out what's happening in the environment. Because these logs are part of the bigger play that is going on. Hence, you need to rely on API Connect capability that collects several of these logs, they correlate it, and then show it to you. Hence, in API Connect environment, If you go and check component logs, you will not be able to figure out much of the detail. You have to rely on the API Connect capability to show the integrated log to you, and that you can see it. I will show it to you how to see it in API Connect environment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's clear.
Okay. Any other question, guys? It's good that questions are coming in. No? Let's go to the next one. This is an API Connect product. Now it has been renamed, but the fundamental goal of this product hasn't changed, and that is creating and managing the API. Version controlling an API is one step towards managing the API. In fact, another step towards managing the API. I must tell you that API Connect does not lend itself to traditional version controlling. Like you have TFS server, you have JIT, and you have traditional version controlling tools. While there is a way in which you can indirectly use these version control tools for your advantage, but these version control tools cannot be integrated with API Connect directly or even indirectly. So I will show you that if you have to use JIT, for example, how do you use that? But for now, it is important for us to understand that versioning capability is inbuilt into the API Connect environment. So you can create an API with a base version. Later on, you can change the API version to something else. You can have both these versions of API running parallelly on your environment. You can lend one of these APIs, or better say the newer version of APIs, to a specific group of users. You may label these group of users beta testers. Then this newer version of API will only be visible to this beta tester group, and they will be able to download or see the definitions of it. You can run several versions of API together. You can deprecate one of them. You can deactivate one of them, and that happens seamlessly. You don't have to manually do much of this stuff. When you define the different versions of API, those versions are internally managed differently. So, version controlling an API is very much feasible in IBM API Connect. Please note, this is a point where many products differ. Many products, especially from Microsoft side, they either do not provide the version control of the API or they provide crude mechanisms for that. Many things miss here and there. So version controlling them practically is a daunting task. With IBM API Connect, this is not a daunting task. This is easier. When we learn in our course much detail, I'll show you how to do the version controlling of the API. I'll also show you how to deprecate them. I'll also show you how to lend themselves only to the beta testers, and so on. You can revert your API to the prior version if it is not working out. So this is about versioning of the API in API Connect. Any question, guys?
Yeah, the conceptual discussions are very clear.
Good. Let's go to the next one. Now comes socialization part. Up to this point, I hope that I have managed to keep your developer interest focused on these slides. But starting from this slide, it looks like that I might lose that focus because you, as a developer, you may not be so much focused on socializing the API. You consider it kind of a afterthought. A developer considers it not technically very important, but I must tell you that this is technically extremely important. What is socializing the API? Well, let us assume that you have opened a good restaurant. But if your good restaurant only has good kitchen and good cooking utensils, it won't draw much of the customer to your restaurant. Rather, it is very important to have a front face of your restaurant where customers could have great experience. Food is definitely important, but ambience is important too. Advertisement is important too. Otherwise, how will people come to know about your restaurant? In the same case, similar case. You have cooked up your APIs. Good. So far, so good. You have it all ready. But if nobody knows about your APIs, how can they consume it? How can they incorporate it in their apps? There is no way. So there must be a way in which your APIs could be branded, your APIs could be advertised, your APIs could be searched, seen, and they must be experimented with. What is that place? That place is what we call developer portal in API Connect. That's the concept associated with socializing the API. So API Connect lets you create, in a very simple word I'm telling you, the API Connect product lets you create a microsite. This microsite is a fully functional website, but it's not a traditional website. This microsite is actually a web application. It will look like a website. It will have your company, it can have your company logo. It can have the complete branding details of your company. Along with it, it lets you define a workflow using which user can sign in or sign up. Users will get registered, their details will get registered. Once signed in or signed up, it lets you see your APIs, the one that you have cooked up. It lets your customer experiment with those API. It has discussion forums, which lets your customer discuss about your API. It has integration with social platform like Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and others that lets you publish those APIs over there too. So you can paste your developer portal link. You can publish it over there. And since it's a website, everybody could see this. It could be searched in Google and people could reach out to. So this is a platform where you're gonna attract your customers and they can experiment with your APIs. If they are good, they can go ahead and subscribe to these APIs and then you can take it further. So, as the bullet point says, the developer portal lets you brand your company look and feel through the configuration, lets you quickly explore the API. Developer can sign up, or you may choose your APIs to be anonymously invoked. It features apps built by the developers. It has hook into the social communities, and it enables developers to manage their applications. So this is a complete web application, comes pre-packaged with your API Connect environment. So if I compare it with the restaurant example, this component provides you all bells and whistles that lets you create the front face of your restaurant so that customers can come in and enjoy your APIs. Any question about this, guys, up to this point? Team, any questions?
I think it's clear, right?
It is clear. As a side note, when you work with on-premise API Connect environment, you essentially have the developer portal that you can customize in any possible way that you want. You can customize its look and feel, its graphics. You can even customize the workflow that is present there. But when you work with cloud environment, you got to be careful. Developer portal do exist there. Without it, API Connect product cannot survive. But the amount of customization that can be done in the cloud depends upon the kind of subscription that you will take. If you take a free subscription, then the amount of customization that you can do with the developer portal, in the developer portal, is practically negligible. But if you choose to take enterprise class subscription or professional subscription, the environment, the cloud environment, will also let you do n number of customizations that you can do in an on-premise environment. So this is something that you have to keep in mind. Second, up to IBM API Connect version 3, there used to be two different terms. One, developer portal, and second, advanced developer portal. Starting from version 4, these two concepts have been merged, and you call it developer portal or advanced developer portal, it doesn't matter. There is only one developer portal. So there is no concept of basic developer portal and advanced developer portal. In an on-premise environment, you will always get advanced developer portal, which lets you customize itself as much as you can. And with a cloud environment, you have restrictions that are primarily associated with the kind of subscription that you take. With free, you can't do any customization. The more you pay, you will have the ability to do the customization. This is something that you have to keep in mind. Cool. Let's go to the next one. Now, this is a term very specific to IBM API Connect. So we got to understand the exact meaning of this term. It's a very basic term. An organization is a set of users who can create or consume the APIs. The English meaning of organization is something different. But in API Connect, when it is used, it points to a set of users. Users who can create the APIs or users who can consume the APIs. There are two kinds of organizations in all IBM API Connect or API management solutions. The first one is called provider organization. This is the group of people who are creators of the API. Developer organization. These are the group of people who are consumers of the API. So the concept should be pretty much clear, and it's actually very simple. We are trying to keep distinct two different kind of users. One, who are creators of the API, who use IBM API Connect tool sets in order to write these APIs. And another set of users who have no bearing to how the API has been developed. They only care about that there is an API and they can consume it. These are called developer organizations. You can even subgroup them as well. For example, within developer organization, you can create subgroup called communities. These subgroups can further have different visibility rights. For example, you can subgroup a developer organization into beta testers and rest of the world. People who belong to beta testers, they essentially belong to developer organization because they're consumers of the API. But they could have different access rights. They could have different visibility rights. So brand new APIs, for example, could only be visible to beta testers. And once they have been certified by the beta testers, they can further be released for rest of the community. So this kind of slicing the developer organization into several different kind of communities is also feasible in API Connect. Any question, guys, up to this point?
Yeah, in fact, my question is something very general. In most companies, the discussion is basically focuses on, introducing API technology and exposing the web, either SOAP or rest of the services. I mean, from your experience, where is the middleware technology moving?
Well, this is a very broad question to answer, I would say. And there cannot be a single answer to this question. But if you ask me where industry in general is moving, so the trend had been that in older days, people wanted to have integration tools. So WebSphere MQ came into the existence. Then people wanted to have more robust integration tool that lets them do the service integration task, so etc. That need gave rise to products like IIB and Data Power. So they embraced SOA. Now, the concept of SOA was good. However, the people who implemented in a monolithic way. So the trend is that people want to free themselves from that monolithic implementation. Hence, they embraced lightweight services like RESTful and microservices, and they are trying to deploy it in an environment. So API has become, so they call these services lightweight services API, and it has become an essential ingredient. With the advent of API, people realize that they need product suite which lets them manage these APIs. And hence, you see several products in the market that are now focused on API management. So this is how the trend is following up. And the API management is going to be a trend for a couple of years, at least, I would say. And API management is a generic platform on top of, beneath which, not on top of which, beneath which you will find several things being cooked. So whether it is artificial intelligence, whether it is cognitive computing, whether it is big data, whether it is social media computing, all of these, they cannot be exposed to a world or to our world if we do not have, if we do not package them in the form of an API. So no matter what you are writing behind the scene, they must be packaged in the form of these APIs and microservices in order to be usable to the world. So, in my opinion, and in fact, this is something that is echoed in the industry too, coming few years, API management is definitely going to be the base platform using which functionalities and advancement in computing will be delivered to customers. Does that somewhat answer your question? Now it was a very broad question. But
yeah, absolutely.
okay, so we have understood the organization. Packaging and API. I would say let's conclude our discussion here on the organization. We'll talk about packaging of an API from tomorrow, and we'll take it further about anatomy of the API. So it's important that we focus on this. See, initially, for few classes are going to be relatively slow. Reason being, I want you guys to focus on the basic concepts of the API management. Once you understand this, future classes are going to be more accelerated, and my expectation is that as we go along, the first few classes, their contents, you're going to learn, imbibe, and you're going to research it about it a little on the web as well. That will strengthen your knowledge about these basic concepts, and it will guide you throughout your life as long as you want to be an API professional. Having said that, let us conclude today's discussion here, and tomorrow we'll pick up from here and take it further. So tomorrow we're going to talk about packaging of an API. We're going to be aware about an API Connect environment, anatomy of an API Connect environment. what it is made up of. And then we will talk about various ways in which the API environment is made up of, so that you are aware about it, what environment you are interacting with, and then we can take it further from there. But that's all for today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, else we are good to conclude.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good night. See you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.